Chief Justice John Roberts has rejected, surprise, surprise, an invitation to testify before the Senate about ethical problems following very damning reports about corruption in the nation's highest court. A ProPublica report this month exposed how billionaire Harlan Crow provided trips and gifts to Justice Clarence Thomas that Thomas, of course, failed to disclose. I'm sure that was an accident, just kidding. Roberts responded to Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin with a letter saying, "I must respectfully decline your invitation. Testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee by the Chief Justice of the United States is exceedingly rare, as one might expect in light of separation of powers concerns and the importance of preserving judicial independence. Because I guess answering questions about corruption would ruin the judiciary's independent ability to be corrupt. You can answer questions, dog. Doesn't mean you need to all of a sudden not be a co-equal separate branch. You could still say, oh yeah, strong point about the corruption, I'll get on that. But do you? I guess we also don't have to worry about any future ethical problems because Roberts included in his letter a statement of ethics, principles, and practices to which all of the current members of the Supreme Court subscribe. All 9 justices signed this 2.5-page piece of paper, but there's nothing enforceable about it, of course. It's just a vague document. Kathleen Clark, a law professor and expert on legal ethics at Washington University, said of the so-called Statement on Ethics, Principles, and Practices the following: "There's nothing new in the statement. The statement is a lot of hand-waving. The problem is not with foundational ethics principles. The problem is there's no accountability for violating the law. And there's nothing in this statement that suggests the court even understands what the problem is." After Roberts declined to testify, Dick Durbin responded by saying, "I'm surprised that the Chief Justice's recounting of existing legal standards of ethics suggests current law is adequate and ignores the obvious. The actions of one justice, including trips on yachts and private jets, were not reported to the public. That same justice failed to disclose the sale of properties he partly owned to a party with interests before the court, before the Supreme Court." And of course, that's Clarence Thomas we're talking about. Quote, "It's time for Congress to accept its responsibility to establish an enforceable code of ethics for the Supreme Court, the only agency of our government without it." Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a longtime critic of the court's ethics practices, derided the court's latest attempt to assure Congress and the public that it can police itself, saying this new statement of principles has virtually no utility. There is still no inbox to file a complaint, no process for fact finding, no way of making ethics determinations, and thus no way of holding justices accountable. But why would you need that? I'm surprised John Roberts even replied to the request to testify. Isn't replying to a letter commingling the branches? It's laughable, it's stupid, it's corrupt, and that's obvious.
Yeah, the Supreme Court here is basically saying we demand to be above the law. And Roberts is partly threatening them, saying like, look, if you're gonna adjudicate this, you gotta come to the Supreme Court, and then we're gonna make it official that we're above the law and you're not allowed to touch us at all, and we can break any damn rules we like. So to understand how brazen this is, Clarence Thomas not only got the vacations that were valued at like $500,000. I mean, unreal vacations, right? And not only got his mom's properties sold to Harlan Crow at above market prices. He cleaned up the entire neighborhood, placed cops there. I mean, but on top of all that, Harlan Crow funded Ginny Thomas's salary at the political organization that she worked at. That's direct money going to the Thomas family. That is Clarence Thomas's wife. They commingle their money. That's as direct a bribe as you could possibly get. And Justice Roberts has been asked for over a decade to have reasonable ethics standards that the court can be held accountable for. And each and every time he is absolutely rejected it and said, no, we will not be guided by any goddamn ethics. We will do whatever the hell we want to do. Of course, he puts it in polite legalese, right? Well, if it were to get adjudicated, right?
Yeah, in 2019, he paid lip service to it. It convinced Justice Elena Kagan he was going to do something. She said, Justice Roberts is now seriously considering this. We think there's going to be some movement on an ethics code, an official enforceable code, and that just disappeared. How do you consider making an ethics code? Once you acknowledge it, you have to come out with the enforceable code, or you're just straight up saying we are corrupt now. And it's not just the facts that Cenk just added, there's more. The corruption at the Supreme Court is far worse than we originally thought. Clarence Thomas had claimed that he didn't have to disclose private jet flights and luxury vacations paid for by Harlan Crow because Crow did not have business before the court. That's a quote. But it turns out in at least one case, Crow did. In January 2005, the court declined to hear an appeal from an architecture firm that wanted more than $25 million from Trammell Crow Residential Company for allegedly misusing copyrighted building designs. When the court issued just a one-sentence order denying the petition, there were no noted recusals, indicating that Thomas participated, and no noted dissents. Trammell Crow is Harlan's father, and at the time, Clarence and Harlan were already friends. The Crow family says they had a non-controlling interest in the company at the time and wasn't involved in its operations, but that doesn't mean they have no financial interest in what happens to that company. And maybe this was never caught because of this startling fact. The justices maintain their own lists of names and companies that get checked for conflicts as new cases come in. Oh, they maintain their own lists. How nice that must be. It turns out the good old Clarence Thomas, by the way, might not even be alone in his corruption. For nearly 2 years, beginning in 2015, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch was looking for a buyer for a 40-acre property he co-owned in Colorado. 9 days after he was confirmed to the Supreme Court for a lifetime appointment by the Senate, the then circuit court judge got one. He got a buyer, the chief executive of Greenberg Traurig, one of the nation's biggest law firms with a robust practice before the high court. Gorsuch, who held a 20% stake, reported making between $250,000 and $500,000 from the sale on his federal disclosure forms. Gorsuch did not disclose, however, the identity of the purchaser. That box was left blank. That's not suspicious at all, right? Just leaving the box blank that would have exposed your corruption. Totally normal, everyday corruption, I guess.
No, that's a joke. That is a very famous law firm. I'm a lawyer. That's a big law firm. They have tons of cases being before the Supreme Court. Their CEO happened to buy the Supreme Court justice's properties right after he's confirmed.
9 days in, the corruption begins to show you how they don't even have an appearance.
Yeah, and then he conveniently leaves out who bought the properties, full well knowing they're a giant law firm who are gonna have cases in front of him. No, this is a joke. It's a total joke.
But Cenk, John Roberts studied it and decided they don't need an enforceable ethics code.
Not only that, for the Clarence Thomas issue, he said, no, it's okay. I had a group of judges pick other secret judges, and they're going to secretly judge if what Clarence Thomas did is okay. I don't know if we'll ever find out what the secret verdict is. Okay, but I got news for you. They ain't gonna do anything to Clarence Thomas. You think they would actually sanction Clarence Thomas or Gorsuch for any of this? No, there's 6 conservative justices, only 3 liberal ones. There's a 0% chance. They're not gonna do, they're all corrupt. If they sanction Thomas, then they gotta sanction Gorsuch. And by the way, Alito also went to these get-togethers, then they gotta sanction Alito. You think they're gonna sanction themselves? And real sanctions, they can say, oh, you know what, we gotta be kicked off the Supreme Court because it turns out we're all crooks. They're not gonna do that. And by the way, the judges that appointed the secret court, almost all appointed by Republicans. So we picked our own judges to decide whether we can keep all this money that we got from all these donors that are in front of our court all the time. Golly gee, I wonder which way it's gonna go.
I don't know, Cenk. I hold out hope that they will hold themselves to account, but also I'm very stupid.
Come on, man. Look, this honestly, last thing. Supreme Court turned this country into a joke. The Supreme Court is the ones that said corporations are human beings, mental, absolutely mental. No actual human being agrees to that. Corruption defined. I explained in my book, Justice Coming, that they meant the corruption. The guy who said that was an out and out crook who actually leaked memos to corporations that were in front of them. They're not human beings. That's insanity. Only the corrupt agree to that. Then they said, and they're human beings, so they have freedom of speech. Okay, well, they can talk all they like. No, speech means unlimited money. So they can give unlimited money, in other words, unlimited bribes to politicians.
Wait, but Cenk,
because they're human beings.
But ordinary human beings have a limit of $2,800 per individual. Why would corporation human beings have unlimited?
No, we don't have speech rights. Now only corporations have speech rights.
That's weird.
And this sick Supreme Court, deeply corrupt Supreme Court, lining their own pockets, only got into power because corporations put them there. Now tell us, corruption? Golly gee, I don't see it. You are the corruption. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.